Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're continuing our exploration of the sometimes confusing world of workers' comp in California. And last time, we briefly touched on how workers' comp kind of intersects with disability rights laws.
Right.
It seemed like there might be like a whole other layer of protection for workers who have permanent disabilities.
Absolutely. But before we get to that, I think it's worth circling back to navigating medical care.
Yep.
We talked about how, the claims administrator usually picks your first doctor unless you've pre-designated. But what if you're, not happy with the care you're receiving?
Yeah, like, can you switch doctors?
You can. You're definitely not stuck.
Okay, good.
But the process can be a little different depending on whether your employer is part of what's called a medical provider network, or MPN,
Okay.
or an HCO, which stands for a healthcare organization.
Okay, so what are those?
They're both basically groups of doctors that your employer has chosen to treat work injuries.
Oh, okay.
So how switching doctors works depends on which one your employer is using.
So, like, how does it work if you're in one of those networks?
It can get a little complicated, but the main thing to know is that you have the right to switch doctors at least once within the first 30 days of treatment.
Okay, that's good.
After that, the rules get a bit more specific,
Okay.
but the guidebook spells it all out pretty clearly.
Okay, good. So at least there's that initial option to switch.
Exactly.
What if you're seeing a doctor that you you've built that rapport, but you disagree with, like, their medical report?
Like they're not recommending the treatment you think you need, or they're saying you're ready to go back to work, and you're like, no, I'm not. What then?
That's where something called independent medical review comes in, or IMR.
Okay.
It's a really important safeguard for you.
Okay.
Basically, if you disagree with your doctor's opinion about your treatment, you can request an IMR.
Okay.
And what happens is the DWC will get you hooked up with a qualified medical evaluator, a QME,
Okay.
and they'll review your case and give an unbiased opinion.
So it's like a second opinion from an expert.
Exactly.
Oh.
And the QME's opinion carries a lot of weight. Like, if they agree that you need a certain treatment, the claims administrator is usually required to authorize it.
Oh, wow. Okay. So there's like recourse if you're not getting what you need.
Exactly.
Okay. So California has these systems in place to, give you some options.
Right.
But what happens if, there are delays in getting your benefits?
Uh-huh.
Or even worse, what if your claim is denied?
That's definitely a stressful situation.
Yeah.
The guidebook really emphasizes, being proactive, keeping detailed records, not being afraid to ask questions. You've got to be your own advocate and stay informed.
Yeah.
Don't let things fall through the cracks.
But what if those efforts don't work? Like, what other options are there?
Well, if you're dealing with what's considered an unreasonable delay or a denial, you might be eligible for penalties.
Okay.
For example, if the claims administrator is delaying or denying treatment without a good reason, you could get up to 25% of the value of that service, up to $10,000.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's significant.
It is. Or if there's an unreasonable delay in your disability payments, you could receive an extra 10% on each late payment.
So it's not just about, like, getting the benefits you're owed, but also kind of, like, holding the claims administrator accountable?
Exactly. There are consequences for not following the rules.
Right. Are there other things you can do, like, if you think something's really wrong?
You can file a complaint with the DWC's audit unit if you suspect there's a pattern of these kinds of problems. Okay, so good to know there are ways to, like, fight back if you're not being treated fairly.
Absolutely.
The guidebook talks a lot about, like, returning to work safely and promptly.
Yeah.
It feels like California is very much, like, encouraging injured workers to get back on their feet as soon as possible.
Well, it makes sense, both for, your well-being and to avoid financial strain, but what happens if your employer doesn't have suitable work available?
Yeah.
Or they're not being cooperative about accommodating your restrictions?
Yeah, that's a good point. That's where those disability rights laws that we mentioned earlier come in, right?
Exactly. Remember, if your employer is discriminating against you because of your injury or because you filed a workers' comp claim, that's a violation of California law.
Okay.
And if they're not making reasonable accommodations for your disability, even though you could do the job with those accommodations, that could violate both federal and state laws like the ADA and FASEA.
Wow. Okay, so there's, like, an extra layer of protection beyond just the workers' comp system itself.
Right. It's all about making sure that injured workers are treated fairly and have equal opportunities in the workplace.
Right.
So, yeah, navigating this whole system can be really tough, but resources like this guidebook can make a huge difference.
Definitely. It helps you understand your rights and empowers you to advocate for yourself. And remember, you're not alone in this.
Exactly. There's support out there, whether it's from your employer, the claims administrator, an information and assistance officer, or even an attorney who specializes in workers' comp.
Don't hesitate to reach out for help. Well, this has been another super informative part of our deep dive, but there's even more to come in part 3. We'll talk about death benefits for families, additional resources, and some final thoughts on how to navigate this whole system successfully.
Stay tuned.